Welcome to episode 53 of the Travel Calumet Original Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Sense. And joining me for today's episode is Alissa Beyer, the Senior Director of Hospitality and Corporate Communications for AriensCo, or Ariens Company, Bob Denor and Mel Edinger, who are docents here at the AriensCo, or Ariens Company. Is it AriensCo or Ariens Company that you guys, when you
I say AriensCo.
AriensCo, okay.
Yep.
AriensCo Museum. Yep, all right.
Yep.
So first, welcome to all three of you. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are in the AriensCo Museum in Brillion, Wisconsin right now, and Alissa and Bob and Mel are going to be providing a virtual tour of the museum for the listeners of the Travel Calumet Original Podcast, and also sharing anecdotes and insights of the history gathered at the AriensCo Museum, a museum 90 plus years in the making. So Alissa, I'm going to start with you. The first question I have to ask is, why is there an AriensCo Museum?
I think it's a perfect place to showcase the product and rich history that we have here at AriensCo. Got a strong legacy here in Brillion, and what better place to have our museum than here in town, supporting our community, our products, and our employees, as well as providing a little showcase into for the community into what AriensCo does.
For listeners, I just want to take a second to describe the building we're in. It's probably about 110 to 120 years old building, mm-hmm. And it's a concrete block kind of construction type. It's a very Art Deco looking building. If you ever come to Brillion, you can't miss it, because in front of the building is a really cool statue of a gentleman with a scarf and snowblower, very representative of what's happened here over the years. And so maybe, Bob, if you could tell me a little bit about the building itself and the history of the building, besides just the setup of what I've just described.
The building originally was an auto dealership. When the family was looking for a place to go to continue their fabrication and all that, this building became available. The people that owned the building actually moved right across the street and had their own dealership, which was Chevy and Oldsmobile. And the front of the building was the display and offices for the auto place, and then the back area was the stalls for repairing cars and all that kind of stuff. And one of the interesting things about this layout is the place where they had the cars actually located for people to look at. Everything around was all made out of concrete floors. That specific area has gravel, because in those days oil pans always leaked. Mm-hmm. So they didn't care. It went into the gravel and everybody was fine. So that's the start of it right there.
Okay. And then what happened to the building? The dealership moved across the street,
right,
and then
exactly.
What happened?
Was acquired by the Ariens family, Henry Ariens and his sons, and then they started fabricating the Model A tillers here. And from that point on, they expanded the building as progressed. There's a display in the World War II area that shows the layout of how it was assembled, or how the various parts of the building were constructed and all that kind of stuff.
So this is the 1930s, are we talking this happened?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
All right. And Mel, from your perspective, what's the mission of the museum?
Well, the mission is to capture the history of the Ariens family, and of which there's a lot, and all the struggles they had over the years. They were involved. They had good times, bad times, and they had the war years and things like that. There wasn't a lot to do, so they got involved in helping with World War II, invasion of Sicily, which we have on display. So there's many things like that. With any company, you have good years, and then you have not so good years, and you got to figure things out and go from there to figure out, okay, where do we go? What's going on in the world today? Where do we fit in? What do we do? That sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So we tried to capture all of that.
Okay.
So not everything is a total success, and then there's times it's not, and you go up through the ups and downs, and that's something we explain too as we do tours, that especially to the younger people, that life isn't always going to be just great and bed of roses and those sort of things. You got to figure out in your lifetime the good things and enjoy that, but then there's going to be some down times in your life as well.
And I'm sorry, Alyssa, what did you want to add?
I was just going to say that I think it's about perseverance and hard work.
Yeah,
That
that too, yeah.
you can fight through the hard times with hard work and see reward and success at the end.
And Mel, you used an interesting phrase in your answer. You described it as a family history.
Yes.
But in a lot of ways, it's your family history too, because you had 47 years here that you worked with AriensCo?
That's correct.
Okay,
And
so-
I saw a lot of good times and not so good times, and you work your way through it, and you go on. So it's kind of training you for life.
We've also had family members that work
And
here
I
as
have
well,
family
generational.
members. Yeah, I have a brother worked here, and so yes,
So it's
it's been my life.
so it's the
And I've
editor
learned-
history too, not just the Ariens history.
Yeah,
That's your
and I've learned a
nuance.
lot over the years because I reported to Francis Ariens, one of the founders, and I kind of worked for Mike Ariens a number of times because I was probably the first technical service person. Because we were growing, they needed somebody to talk to dealers and answer questions and help them with issues. And it was always a situation when the phone would ring, Mike says, "We will answer the phone and we will talk to our people." So even Mike and Francis would pick up the phone on occasion. And I was kind of the guy, because I sat kind of between them, and then it'd end up on my desk, and I would go and try to resolve it and so on. So I learned a lot going through that, how to deal with people, and took some classes too, how to help, deal with those difficult situations.
Listeners, I've had the opportunity to tour the facility before, and I've been here on a couple of other occasions already as well. And we were thinking, the four of us were thinking it might be a great idea. We're going to try this today, kind of doing a virtual tour of the museum for you. We'll be actually on tour, seeing things, and hopefully doing a good enough job to describe, so you at least can get a mental mind's eye view of what we're seeing in front of us. So if you would like to just kind of kick back, relax for a little bit, we're going to get started. All right, we are in the garage portion of the museum. It's a replica, and it's a really well-organized garage. I'm looking at some orange equipment, and the bright color orange, synonymous with the Ariens company logo, and Ariens logo, I should say specifically. And it's a very organized layout work area. It's not your typical garage where you have cars or vehicles in it, but it's more of a work garage. And I guess, Bob, if you could just give listeners what is the garage? What's the importance of the garage, and why is it here in the museum?
The museum itself, this garage was part of the museum prior to the 2018 rehab, if you will, to what we see today. And what it was the replica of where they actually assembled the first Model A tiller back in 1933. And inside of the museum itself, this is really I would say the most, what you would say, authentic for the 1930s and 1940s as far as all of the things that are inside of here. Some of the shelving, what you're leaning on right now, is made from reworked farm timber. All of the shelving in here is basically made from that kind of stuff. The Model A that's inside of here is an actual Model A from the 1930s. So it's a museum replica. Some of the things that you see in here, like old sleds. The old sled is 1920, 1930 vintage. In the back area, there is manufacturing equipment. There is a metal lathe that I found over in California. That's 1940. It still works. It's in pristine shape. It's wonderful. In the corner, the drill press that I found on the East Coast. That's 1935. So again, it's all part of the same general 1930, 1940, if you would, all things considered. The wooden case you see in the back there, that's actually an inspection case that Francis Ariens had, because he was the QC guy for the quality control guy for the family when they were making the Model A's and the Model B's, Model C's and Model D's. So everything ties together one way or another. We try to make it as, I would say, authentic as possible.
And from a corporate perspective, Alissa, you're working with people that are, have been with the organization for many, many years, and those that are just started a few days ago. How does this reconstruction of the family garage, how does that play in their training? Is it brought up at all in kind of the cultural establishment with those new employees and those that have been here for a long time?
It's a great question. Yes, we try to have our new employees come through the museum space as much as possible. Part of the reason why we're reopening it as well is so they can bring family members through the museum space as well. But we think this really makes us stand out as a differential than other employers. We've got strong history that we're extremely proud of, and we want our new employees to feel part of that history, so they're a part of something bigger than just themselves. They're a part of making history and living history as well.
And Mel, there's a phrase that's thrown around the area, King of Snow. Can you, from a AriensCo employee of 47 plus years, tell me what that means to you?
Well, Aaron's company, west of the Tillers, if I can show you a little bit later, but where snow got started here, but snow was the big part of Aaron's business for years and years. It really made the company grow and made them successful. That's why we are the king of snow.
And it's a phrase you hear around Calumet County on a regular basis, folks, especially if you're doing something out at Aaron's Nordic Center at an event. It's pretty cool to have that moniker associated with the Aaron's family, the Aaron's company, and also now Aaron's Nordic Center.
I'll also say that when it wasn't snowing, I go to Mike Aarons and say, Mike, it's time to pray. And it wouldn't be long, it'd be snowing.
There you go. All right. So there was a little thing in American history that happened in the 20s and 30s, actually the last few months of the 20s and into mostly all the 30s and even into the early 40s, and that was the Great Depression. Aaron's company started pretty much right before or right during the Depression. Can you maybe give a little bit of a history of how that impacted the company and things that happened and took place during the Depression here?
Well, it all kind of started, as I said earlier, is that there's down times and then there's good times, and the Depression was not so good. So Aaron's is looking for work, and what do we do? And it was also getting into a time when gardening was becoming more of what people do. So Henry Aarons was thinking, okay, what can I do to help people grow vegetables and so on? And that's when he thought of some way to prepare the soil, not only for homeowners, but also commercially. As you'll see as we move on through the museum, where we work commercial farmers that would grow vegetables and how Aaron's company produced products for that type of need, because that's what was going on in the world, and how do you adapt to help those people. But it all started with a model tiller that we have on display, and actually this is the very first tiller ever assembled in the United States.
And it's right here. That history is right in front of us, right here.
Right here, right in front of us. And Henry tried to develop his own engine at one time, but he never really got that to work. So then he went to Wisconsin Engine and bought an engine, and he'd build a tiller, and he'd sell it. He'd go buy another engine, build another tiller, and then on September 11th of 1933, he got an order for 10. And that's when Aaron's company was incorporated.
A little over 90 years.
Yes.
The opportunity to see that type of history is got to be really something that might get lost on the younger generation. How do you, as docents, you and Mel and Bob, how do you guys present that in such a way to try to capture the kids' imagination and wanting to learn more about what's going on here at Aaron's?
Well, usually when I do kids coming through, I said, when you became an employee of the Aaron's company, you became part of the family, of the Aaron's family. And that was depicted in the Brillion Ironworks portion of this museum, where Henry Aarons, through the Depression years, he actually cashed in his life insurance policy to compensate his employees because he felt they were part of his family. And that is still going on in the company today.
School groups come through from time to time?
Yes, very much. It's as much a learning center as it is a history center. Obviously, history and learning go all together, hand in hand. But to ask a young kid, what do you see in here? And he say, well, I see a snow blower, and I see lawnmowers, I see snowmobiles, and all that kind of stuff. Well, then you ask them, how does it run? Well, then you've got them, because they start thinking. It's not visual. Now they start, well, yeah, how does it run? Going through the museum, we have ways of showing them through STEM and everything else how things actually are fabricated to a certain degree, but also what makes them go. It's not just the engine. Just because the engine's on top of that machine doesn't make it go. There's a lot of stuff inside of there that engineers and people assemble to make that thing go. And then they're like, oh yeah, now I see that there's a difference. You just don't walk through and it's pretty, it's kind of nice. You get to ride and get to sit on a machine. Mom takes pictures of you inside of the snow globe, but the rest of it is like, this is how the machine works. And they go home with that. I learned today how to make a snowblower go. Never thought you'd come into the museum and see that, did you?
All right, listeners, I just want to let you know we've actually moved. We're outside of the garage now, looking at it actually from the outside. And we're in an area that has 6 different tillers. Again, mostly orange, but there's some kind of army green going on in this room as well. And in addition to that, we actually have what's kind of a mock-up, it feels like, of a greenhouse. Could you maybe, Bob, talk to me a little bit about this area of the museum and what's being shown here?
In the beginning, the area of the United States, the Midwest, in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, in the wintertime, how did anybody get fruits and vegetables? Well, you didn't have the people in California, Texas, or Florida shipping stuff up in 18-wheelers because there was no refrigerations at that time. So the upper Midwest had their own greenhouses where they actually grew on elevated beds all of the vegetables that people in this area were going to eat. However, because of the circumstances, they became infested with something called a little worm called a nematode. And why was a nematode bad? Well, the nematode loved those raised beds because, number one, they never were tilled very well, so the soil got compacted, it got warm, it got moist, and it was dark. Everything that a nematode loved. They also loved one other thing. They loved roots of vegetables. So the yield from all of these places started to go down, down, down. The Model A tiller put into those beds, agitated that ground, brought the stuff from the bottom to the top, aired it out. The nematodes started to die. The yields started to go back up. When all was said and done, by the time it was all over with, after selling these Model A's throughout most of them, almost all of the upper Midwest greenhouses had an Ariens Model A or Model B tiller, Model B being a smaller unit.
And they're raised beds, Mel, so that's not an easy thing to kind of walk a tiller through, right? How was the design? How did that impact the design of the tillers?
I don't know that it did, basically.
Okay.
They really worked at it. We have a little film that shows putting this big tiller in a raised up bed, and you got 3 guys trying to do this with this monstrous tiller, and it really was a chore. But they went and worked at it, and you'll be able to see that coming to the museum as to how they actually accomplished that. And it was successful in killing the nematodes and started a good reason for tillers to be used today in gardens and so on.
So the pioneering work was done during the Depression to provide people an opportunity to raise their own vegetables, kind of the Victory Garden kind of scenario and concept. And all that is kind of the pre-knowledge and precursor to today's garden tillers that you see in people's homes that they use on a regular basis.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. We're looking at the family use of the tiller, but obviously there's implications that other parts of agriculture, larger farms, could use this. What kind of led to the development of tiller usage on agricultural land as opposed to just the home garden?
Well, there was a need for vegetables because at that time, a lot of people were growing their own, trying to grow their own, but there's also stores needed vegetables and so on. So as Henry worked with the farms, the vegetable growers, they had a need to prepare the soil and keep it tilled against weeds and that sort of thing growing. And that's when he developed, in the 50s, we call a tillavator, where they could grow, they would design these so that they could till up to 16 rows at a time. And to think of that, that's monstrous in the 50s.
Really revolutionized a lot of the farm communities in the South and the Southeast, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
So, yeah, it was very accommodating for those people to be able to really grow their vegetables and do it in a way that take care of the weeds and the bugs and so on. And it really worked out very well, and it was very successful for Aaron's company to be in that business.
So we now have moved on from the greenhouse area of the museum, and we've kind of come into the snow area of the museum. And I have to tell listeners, there's a big snow globe that we'll talk about in a little bit. So if you ever want to get inside of a snow globe and feel what life is like there, you get a chance to do that here. The kids love it. But we'll get back to that in a little bit. But when you walk through the tour here, you'd make a left turn, and there's this wonderful wall mural of a gentleman that looks like he's using an early version of a snowblower. Mel, would you be able to kind of walk us through that picture?
Actually, the tiller that we talked about in the garage, Henry had an issue with snow. It seemed like it snowed a lot in those days, and it's difficult to move snow. So he's watched farmers in the past that would fill a silo with corn silage, that he could blow corn silage up into a silo. So why can't I blow snow? So he took the tiller mechanism off the back of the tiller and very crudely made a snow blower and put it on the front of this tiller and went outside and see if it would work. And it actually blew snow. Maybe not as efficiently as today's snow blowers, but that was the beginning of a snow blower. And it was on the front of a tiller. And that's when snow equipment took off for Aaron's company.
And it's really neat about that picture. It's directly across from, is this one of the earlier prototypes, or is this the first one that we're looking at?
This is a tiller that we were making at that time, but we made the snowblower that we didn't have anywhere. We couldn't find, we don't even know how it was powered, so it's not even hooked up to be powered. But it does display a snowblower, a fan and something that can blow snow.
Now it's obviously changed a lot over the years. I have an Ariens snow thrower at home myself. I love it, and I've had snow throws probably for 25, 30 years of my life. Well, actually longer when I go back to my parents and theirs. And I've kind of grown up with the models, and they're very easy to use, and they get easier and easier every generation. But I'm looking here as you kind of go on from this first prototype, or for this first example. Then we start seeing the history of the snowblower development here from all the way through the 60s and forward. Can you maybe walk us through that, Bob, and talk a little bit about that?
The model that you saw on this table as we're walking by the mirror with Henry is, this is a downsized one. This is the Model C of the tillers, if you will. And a gentleman up in the company fabricated a snowblower on the front end of the Model C, sizing it to the size of the Model C itself, but not as big as the Model A. You transition into the big snow area and the display of all of the snowblowers. The very first one you see is the 1960, one of the original snowblowers that went out into the field to actually be used by customers for the very first time. The first 500 failed. Why did they fail? They failed because the inside that they used was a gear case assembly. They had not had any other design, they only used that. The front of the unit, where the augers bring the snow in, that transitioned as time went on to different designs on how it was put together. But the inside of the snowblower itself, the thing that makes it move, actually they redesigned it, and those 500 were now redesigned with what most people would understand is the clutch assembly on a car, where you have a drive disc off of a plate, and that basically moves the unit back and forth on the snowblower now. That design, that basic design, is still used today on the very snowblowers that are fabricated in our plant at this very moment. Little tweaks here and there, but the actual design is that good that it's lasted this long from 1960 all the way forward. All of the other things that you see on that display are the various kinds of augers that they now had, the side plates on the snowblower head itself, how much those have changed, how the tires have changed. In the beginning, what they used turf tires. They didn't have anything else for snow. What they have to do, they had to put chains on so they had traction. Finally, at the very end of it, when you have the Primo units, where you got really, really big snow out in the hills and all that type of stuff, they have a track. It's got a Caterpillar track on it. It'll go through anything. And the snow blowers, the big units, will throw 50 feet of snow in the air. So if you got an angry neighbor, you can take care of him in a heartbeat. You know, he won't be your angry neighbor for long.
Okay.
He'll be asking you, can you come over and do mine now too?
There you go. There you go. And Alissa, we in this section of the museum, I referred to it earlier, was the snow globe. So the snow globe's got to be a highlight when you're giving tours, especially for the younger crowd.
Most definitely.
Yeah. What kind of things do you hear some of the kids say when they see this and they want to explore it?
I think it's a very unique feature of our museum and a unique opportunity for both kids and adults alike. So we get people, anyone who wants to go in the snow globe, they certainly can. It just provides a fun, whimsical way to connect people with our products and what our products perform, right? So it's a chance for you to have interaction with quote unquote snow and kind of get more connected to us and our products.
So if people are looking to do a Christmas card picture, it's a great opportunity.
We do that. We have a lot of opportunities where families and kids come in to do their Christmas card photo with here, right in front of the snow globe or in the snow globe. Makes a lovely photo.
And to hear the conclusion of our conversation, please go to episode 54 of the Travel Calumet Original Podcast. Thank you.